Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the Wayne Town Hall, Wayne, New York. It is the 30th of November, 2006, approximately 10 a.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
John H. McIntire. I was born in Bath, New York, 3rd month, 26th day of 1941.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I had a 10th grade, and I left in 10th grade, and then I got my GED in the service.
Okay. Now, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Why did you decide to enlist?
Well, back then, if you didn't enlist, you got drafted. And I figured I would enlist, and that way I would get my choice of which branch of service I went in.
Why did you select the Marines?
Our whole family was Marines. My older brother was in the Marines, and my brother-in-law was in the Marines. My cousin was in the Marines, and we're pretty much all a Marine family.
Okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
Parris Island, South Carolina.
Okay. How long were you there?
16 weeks.
What was it like? What was your reaction to it?
Well, it was a place you wouldn't want to go back. It was tough. It was tough training, and they had discipline back then, and it was probably pretty much like they talk about the Marine Corps boot camp. I think there was 66, I think, graduated my platoon. We started out with like 80, so quite a few dropped out.
Did you receive any additional specialized training at all?
When we left Parris Island, we went to Camp Geiger at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for advanced combat training.
And how long were you there?
You know, I almost think it was like 6 to 8 weeks. It seemed like it was about like that.
Okay. What kind of advanced training did you receive?
There was field problems and compass marches and night training, and I mean it was a pretty extended combat, the way combat is, you know.
Right, right. Were you trained probably on the M14s then?
Yep, the M14 just well, when we got to Camp Geiger, the old M1s were there.
Oh, okay.
But in Parris Island, we carried the M14.
Okay. After your advanced training, what was your assignment?
I was waiting for assignment at Camp Lejeune, and they thought I was going into the tanks, and the Cuban crisis broke out. And I was sent to the motor pool on a working detail party, and we were changing tires. And there was a tractor trailer there. We changed the tires on the tractor trailer, and we need to have it moved. And a guy said, "Do you know how to drive it?" And I said, "I think so." And I got in it, and I drove it around, and I backed it in. Boy, everybody started screaming and hollering at me because I didn't have a license and everything. And I looked up, and here come a master sergeant. And his name was David White, and he was probably a 25-year man then. And he come down through there and he said, "Can you drive one of them?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You get in my Jeep with me." And we went right up to the battalion, and I was transferred to his into his motor pool, and the next day I went and took a road test, and then we started hauling supplies to Morehead City, loading ships to go to the Cuban crisis there when Kennedy was the president. And I was in that motor pool probably 6 or 8 months till I got signed to go overseas.
So this is the June that you were in the motor pool?
Right.
Now, were you there when Kennedy was assassinated?
No, I was in Okinawa on the firing range.
Okay, how did you feel when you heard about that?
Well, I'll tell you, we was qualifying, and that morning they announced that the president had been killed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget that instructor said, every time you fire around the day, you put Lee Harvey Oswald's head in that bullseye. And I'll tell you what, everybody come off that firing line firing. I think it really motivated everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I was at when he was killed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When did you go into the Pacific?
You know, I'm not quite sure of the date. I think it was 1963 I went over to Okinawa.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Going for 64. I was over there 18 months.
Okay. Now, what was your assignment in Okinawa?
We got put to an artillery, 0811, and of course I had my MOS of 3531, which was transportation. And the motor sergeant left over there, and I was a PFC at the time. And I got Lance Corporal meritoriously, and they put me in as motor sergeant. And I was in charge of the drivers and the trucks that hold the guns,
Mm-hmm.
the 05 Hollister guns. So, and that was my job over there as motor sergeant.
Okay. Did you ever get any R&R time while you were there? Or?
Yeah, in Hong Kong, China. I was aboard 14 ships. We'd load up in Okinawa, and then we'd go on different field problems. We went to Camp Fuji, Japan on cold weather training. And that was an experience. We slept in tents. And I'll never forget it. We got up there and had formation. Well, what the formation was for was to tell us how to run these oil burner stoves. Well, 5 in a tent. Well, we got in this tent, and Fortner said, I know how to run one of these stoves. My grandfather had one. And we said, well, get it going, and then it'll be warm when we come back in after the formation. Well, I don't know what he did, but that stove jumped about that high off the ground, and it caught fire right in that chimney, in the peak of it. And I never seen anything burn as fast as they did. And we grabbed our sea bag just as we're going out the door. So tent fell in, and Fortner, well, that's what the formation was for, was to tell us how to run this. We should have waited, but we didn't. And but we had fire watches that every night people had to walk up and down each street, and there was probably 6 or 7 tents burnt. I mean, it was not. You'd have a fire every now and then. I mean, they lost a lot of tents. But they built barracks right across, and the Japanese took them over and kicked the Americans back in the tents. That's why they called it Tent City. But yeah, that was cold. You took showers outside, and it was 20 below zero. Mm-hmm. And everybody took showers. I mean, you had to take a shower every day. So that was pretty. And I was also a prison chaser when I was aboard ship. And a guy went over in our battalion, a guy went over the hill in Japan, if you could imagine that, down to Yokosuka. And they sent me and one of my drivers to get him out of that brig and bring him up to, well, way down below zero. We had one of them weapons carriers, and I went in the jail there and got him signed out. And I had him handcuffed to me. And I thought, I'll sit up front with that windbreaker and I won't get all that snow and the cold. And we just started down that street and he jumped out, handcuffed me. Well, when I went over the tailgate and hit the road, I hollered, and this Dice, the guy that was driving the PC, stopped. Well, he was one of my drivers. And he got driver of the guard that night, and I was corporal of the guard. And I thought he broke my arm. That's what I thought he did. Well, the keys to the handcuffs was in my pocket. And Dice was a big, rugged guy. We got the keys out, and I got my handcuff off. And I shook that arm out. And the more I thought about the matter, I got, you know, and I loaded him with that nightstick. And I handcuffed him right to the front of that steak pocket. And I said, you jump out now and I'll drag you to Fuji. And I got in the cab and I rode up with it. Well, when we got him in under that tent, man, I didn't think I'd worked him over that bad, but I'd really done a number on him. Luck would have it, my motor transport officer was the officer of the day. And he wrote him up on about everything he could charge him with. Escape, and so I got out of that one pretty good. I didn't want to make a career of that prison, Jason.
Now you said you were on 12 ships.
14 ships
14. So you were fleet assigned then?
Yeah, we'd go out and went to Japan, we went to Formosa. I mean, you'd go full of field problem. I'm sure we was in Korea too. Mm-hmm. And we stayed out one time 3 months because they had a fleet right in that was ready to go in any place, you know, at any time. So, yeah, I spent a lot of time on the water while I was over there. I doubt if we spent half of our time in Okinawa because the rest of the time we were on the move.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what were some of your assignments while you were on these ships?
Well, you had your mess duty and you had your whatever they. I was in charge of the prisoners. A lot of times and we'd take them out for PT and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And different, depending on your rank, what your assignments were, you know. Mm-hmm. But a lot of classes. I mean, they wasn't a lot you could do aboard ship, you know. Clean rifles, inspections. I mean, mm-hmm. This type of thing. But and then when you went on the problem, if you done any fording, when you got back to Okinawa there, you had to pull all the wheels because they had salt water in them. And it was, and you had constantly cleaning because of the salt air, you know. Mm-hmm. A lot of people painting on ships, you know, that the maintenance on the ship there was high in the salt water. Mm-hmm. But it was board LSTs on flat bottom boats.
So you're mostly on, you weren't on ships like destroyers or carriers? Or
the only time I was on a carrier, and that happened in Formosa, that field problem lasted, I think 11 days, and you never got a shower, and it was so hot. And you slept in the weeds when you slept, and I broke out in some kind of a rash. And the doctor that was on my ship didn't know exactly what it was. So they sent a helicopter over from the aircraft carrier to take me to see a doctor there on the aircraft carrier. And that was the only time I was on board an aircraft carrier, was from that over to see that doctor.
So they never found the cause or what it was or anything?
No, you know, they had me lay out in the sun and on the deck. I got a chip that I could take my shirt off. And, but you know, in later years I broke out with psoriasis. And I often thought that was like how it started, that my psoriasis. So I don't know if that was a start of that. You know, I mean, I really never know what the rash was. I don't think they ever did. But when I did get psoriasis, it did make me think of that, you know. So
probably just some sort of tropical disease or skin disease.
That's what they thought at first, the weeds that we were in maybe. And I was allergic to one of them, but I think he gave me a cream to rub on it too, as I remember. But it cleared up. I mean, there was nothing that...
Now you had RNRAC in the Philippines and also in Hong Kong, and you had been in Japan. Which do you think were your favorite places that you went to, and why?
Oh, I don't know if I had a favorite place. You know, I enjoyed all of them really, but there was nothing. I didn't like Okinawa any better than I did Japan or Hong Kong. There, we just was parked out in the you know, ship that was going into Hong Kong and still staying in the ship. You know. And I'll never forget, was in a bar there in Hong Kong, and the gal in that bar was telling this guy named Singley, he run the bulldozers for us. We had a bulldozer in our outfit that would cut ways for, put the guns in and that type of thing. And him and her got an argument over who had the most money, China or the United States. And she said China did because China had more gold, and Singley said, well, I'll tell you what, you build a gold fence around the United States, and if we like it, we'll buy it. That was his answer. I never forgot that. Forgot that. But the biggest thing is that when my time was the civil rights movement, and we had a lot of race riots. In fact, we had a bad one in the Philippines. And in the EM club, but that was the only one I was involved with overseas. But I was involved in one in Quantico, Virginia, when we came back to the States.
How bad were they? Were
They
people
were bad.
injured? And
The one in Quantico, I was a bartender at Quantico in the EM club, and I think 5 got killed in that. And the club there, the bar was probably, I'm going to say 80, 90 feet long, and there was 2 bartenders. And when I was in Quantico, I was in the bus section. And in fact, every other day I run the Bethesda, Maryland hospital there in Bethesda, Maryland. And we were tending bar this particular night, and Weisingle, he was a black guy, and he come up to me and he said, called me Mac, he said, Mac, I think my soul brother's up something. And we were pushing a lot of beer. And I thought, I went over and I said, I don't think so, you know, it's getting too close to closing time. Well, it was timed, and all the ones that broke loose. And they started throwing pictures, they started throwing tables, they started throwing chairs, and everything, ashtrays. I mean, it was, and the one guy was just trying to get his wife out of there, and I see, and he got hit right in the head with a table, and killed him. But we had a gunnery sergeant that was in charge of the club, and he was an alcoholic, if you could imagine that, that they put a guy like that in charge of the club. Well, we told him we had a riot, and he called the MPs, and they sent one MP over. And the downstairs was NCO clubs, and the upstairs was EN club. Well, the MP come over, and they threw him right off the balcony and broke his back. And then they called in that riot squad. Well, they threw in some, I don't know what kind of gas grenades they were, or whatever they was, but I'll tell you what, they broke that riot up in a hurry. And they closed the club down, and General Wiesman was the commanding general. And everybody working up in that club was in his, in that investigation, right? Well, nobody knew whatever triggered it, you know? I mean, you couldn't point to any person. It was a...
Instigator.
Yeah, I mean, and tending bar was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because all while I was growing up as a kid, I wanted a bar room. And because they all drove new cars, right? I thought that's where the money was. But after I attended bar there for about a year, I didn't want nothing to do with no bar. In fact, I turned in my resignation. And we said, we was in that general's office, and I said to the general, well, he said, we're gonna, the mayor come in, and he said, you open that club back up. You're not gonna send the trouble out there to me. And pretty quick, he got a call from Washington to tell him to open that club back up. So he said, any bartender that's not tending bar will be bouncing. And he put more bouncers on. And I said, General, I'd already resigned. He said, you will resign when I tell you you are. And I said, yes, sir. Well, I stayed another month, and then he let me resign. But every night we had to work in that club till, and then I stayed out of that club pretty much after I got out of there. But they had more problems too. And then I got discharged in '66. I got extended 4 months via the Vietnam crisis.
Did you ever go to Vietnam?
I went there, when I went there, we flew out of Okinawa, and I was there about 28 days at Da Nang, and then my time was up, and they took me out aboard ship and brought me back, and that was the first airplane ride I'd ever taken, and it would be the last one, I thought. We got on a C-130, and they sent us to Camp Hague, clear up on the other end of the island in Okinawa, and we loaded that truck right full of 05 howitzer rounds. And those C-130s, you back the gun in, and then you had to unhook it. And then they had to tie it down, and then you back the truck in over top of the tongue, and you tied that down. And the only one on that plane was me and the crew. And we come time to land, the landing gear wasn't put on. well, first of all, it was too heavy to land. And so we took, and when he started that plane, I knew I didn't want to be in it. Because it cranked on and finally the smoke belched out of that one engine and it started. Well, we went down that runway and it never picked up. And the hedgerow kept getting closer and closer and closer. And I thought he was going to go right through that hedgerow. But he just brought it up and we just cleared it. And we'd forever getting that in the air. And come time to land, he went and dumped the fuel out of the wings, just opened them right up. And away went fuel. I never seen nothing like it. Then when we come in, didn't think the landing gear was down. So we flew over the tower, and it was down, but they didn't know if it was locked. And this lieutenant come back, and he strapped me right to the wall. And I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "This is your best chance of survival." Said, "You go right with this section of the plane." Well, that didn't sound like any good thing to me, right? So, when we landed, we bounced down that. And then crew was nervous. They had that runway, they had all the emergency crews out and everything for us to come in. And then they was in a big hurry, because now we're late, right? My clutch leg was shaking so bad to pull ahead and get that gun hooked on, right? And then these, along the sides was these seats for the pathfinders in the Marine Corps, the paratroopers actually, where they jump out of the plane. When I pulled out of there, the gun wheel caught that seat. And I strung them from here to the barn. And the captain, he was there waiting for me, of our battery, right? And I said to him, "I don't know how I'm getting off this island, but it's not going to be an airplane." And he laughed, but I didn't think it was funny. But when they took me out, they took me a helicopter out to the ship. And there was quite a few of us went back. But my outfit was annihilated over there. 1st Battalion, 12th Marines, Bravo Battery, that I found out later. Their station was overrun. But when I used to go to Bethesda, Maryland, there to the hospital, I had that run every other day for Quantico, Virginia. Went to headquarters of the Marine Corps, the Pentagon, and got people off all the way up through there. And anybody that needed to go to Bethesda, Maryland, but back then is when they took a lot of the injured was in there, you know, the Bethesda, Maryland hospital. So I could find out a lot what was going on, you know. And my nephew, he lives in Florida now, but he received a lot of medals from Vietnam. I don't know what they all were, but some the president even gave him. And I think he got them in '68. It was about the time. He went in '68, maybe '70s when he got. But he was well decorated. But I went to, we went to vacation there last year, and I took to Williamsburg, Virginia, and I stopped at Quantico, and I went in the back gate, and I said to the MP there on the gate, I said, "You know, I got discharged from here 39 years ago. I said, I don't suppose I could go on the base and look it over." He took my, looked at my driver's license, asked me what my number was, and I told him 1999 57-7, and they let me on. But you wouldn't know it was the same base. Our barracks was still there, but the motor pool was all civilians now. And back when I was there, it was all Marines that drove the buses, drove the trucks.
Mhm.
So it changed quite a bit. But they had a lot of going on there at Quantico. The FBI Academy was there. That's where they trained their officers. And that was the best duty station of all, you know, that I was at.
Now, when you were discharged, did you wear your uniform home?
No, I had a car when I was discharged. I think I wore the uniform outside the gate. And I didn't leave right that day. I think I left the next day. I went and seen some friends down there and left the next day. But I had my own car when I was discharged. In fact, I got my car when I was at there. I used to come home weekends quite a bit from Quantico.
Were there any persons that were in the Marines with you that you left an impression on you?
Oh yeah, there was quite a few that I, you know, you'll never forget them. There was when I was a motor sergeant there in Okinawa, or when I was over there, the captain called me in one day and he said, John, this guy was named Franklin. He said, the Red Cross has got a hold of me, and his mother don't even know where he was at. And he said, I want you to make sure he writes a letter to her and you mail it. And I said, okay. Well, Franklin was probably one of the best men I had as far as the work goes, doing the job, driving the truck, taking care of his truck. But he used to get me in more trouble because he'd never shine his boots, he'd never shine his buckles, you know. He was sloppy himself, but as far as doing the job, he was one of the best I had. So I went down and I said, Frank, I said, Captain called me in, Frank, and I said, your mother don't even know where you're at. I said, now I don't want to read the letter, but I said, you write her a letter and you address it to her, and I'm going to mail it. And he said, I'm not writing her a letter. I'm never going to write her a letter. And he had nothing good to say about her. And so he said to me, he said, when my brother, he had a twin brother, and when they were 3 months old, she abandoned him in an apartment and run off with this guy. And when they found him, they was just about starved to death. And they put him in an orphanage. And they was in that orphanage till they was 12 years old. And then she got him out of the orphanage and got custody of him. And her and her boyfriend got those kids these paper routes. And he said the bicycles was used bicycles. They had about 5 spokes in the wheel, that's what he said. And every nickel they made went to them to buy beer and cigarettes. And so they talked them into letting them join the service when they're 17 years old. And they signed, and the deal was those boys was going to send them home the money. Well, they didn't send them home the money, and they never heard from them. So I went back and told the captain. I said, you know, he's not going to write his mother. And after the story he told me, I ain't sure I would either. So I told the captain what he told me. And the captain said, well, I'm going to write her a letter and tell him where she's at, give him his address. If she wants to write him, she can, but I'll let her know where he's at, and I'm not going to. He didn't make him write a letter to her either. Well, there was a lot of people that left impressions on you. There was a cook that came into our outfit. It was private. And every morning you run 3 miles. And he checked into our outfit, and he was a pretty quiet guy, and but he was a private, and fell out from formation the next morning, and that lieutenant gave us a right face. We was going to go for the run. He dropped out of rank, started running up the sidewalk back to the barracks. The lieutenant hollered at him and said, "Marine, where are you going?" He said, "You're going for a run, aren't you, Lieutenant?" The lieutenant said, "Yes." He said, "And everybody runs." Pappy said, "Last time I run on this island was smoking." And he said, "When I run again, it'll be smoking again." And he was on the first invasion of Okinawa in World War II. And he's a 30-year man. Well, he got, after you got to know him, you knew why he was a private. Because he didn't have to stand the commanding general's inspection because he had more medal than the commanding general. And he was constantly over the hill. I mean, well, they was giving him battalion office hours. And he'd go up and come back from battalion office hours, and major's driver bring him back, and he'd be blistered. And the captain couldn't figure it out. Well, come find out, him and that major was in some battle together. And the story was only 5 of them made it. So he'd go up there, and him and the major would have a grand old time, talk, and never do nothing to him. So finally, they just never did anything to him. Whatever he did, and nobody paid any attention to him. But he was on the first invasion of Okinawa.
Did you join any veterans organizations at all?
No, the American Legion.
Are they active or?
Not so sorry to notice it. I go in once or twice a year, and as I got older, I don't drink hardly anything. So if you don't drink, there's not too.
Not much to do then.
No.
How do you think your time in the Marines had an effect on your life?
Oh, it definitely made you appreciate our country. That's for sure. Opportunities that we have that other people don't. I hope we never give them, but sometimes it scares me.
All right, well, thank you very much for the interview.
Okay.